You guys have been talking about Jen Psaki's comments that she doesn't believe that the migrants down here intend to stay for a long time. That's news to these folks down here. If they were to actually come down here and talk to them, I think they would realize that they're not traveling from halfway around the world to go on a little camping trip for a few days under this bridge and then just go back into Mexico. They intend to stay. They know under the Biden administration, if they can just step foot on U.S. soil, they will have a chance to be released into the U.S., either with a future court date or something else. They know that. The word about that has spread. And that is just a basic reality of why so many people are showing up in this surge right here. What does catch and release look like? Look at this video that we just shot here in Del Rio today. These are migrants being dropped off, busloads of them, at a local NGO here in Del Rio. They get some food, they get some water, they get some supplies, then they either get put on buses to other cities in the U.S., or we've seen it at Del Rio Airport today, flights full of Haitians going wherever they want. One of our cameramen had Haitians on his flight today. Journalists have been flying out seeing Haitians all over their flights, and it's in direct contrast to what DHS Secretary Mayorkas said here on Monday. Remember, he had a message for the migrants. Do not come. Your journey will not succeed. You will be sent back. That is not the case. Maybe it is for a majority of single adult men and non-pregnant single adult women, but my Border Patrol sources here on the ground in Del Rio are telling me, as it stands right now, they are flat out releasing all family units and any women who are claiming they are pregnant. They want to get this camp cleared out as fast as possible. So what they're doing is they have two options. They can let them go with an NTR, a notice to report, or an NTA, a notice to appear. What's the difference? A notice to report means they're asking the migrant, hey, please, will you show up to this ICE office in the future within 60 days and report? An NTA is more strict. An NTA says you must show up to this office on this exact date. Well, my sources here on the ground tell me they're doing predominantly NTRs right now. Why? He tells me NTRs take about 20 minutes or so for a Border Patrol agent to process, while an NTA can take upwards of an hour. And again, the optics of this camp are horrible. It's third world-like conditions down here.
Should we be looking at the budget of Department of Homeland Security? Because I was not aware that whips, people had that kind of equipment on them that they could use on humans.
The fact that we are dealing with mainly black migrants and black immigrants and asylum seekers at our border in this kind of way really speaks to the kind of racism, systematic racism that is embedded in that department.
Jen, I want to get to that. It's a big address from the president, but these images along the border are shocking, and the bar is high for shocking images along the border. You've called them horrific. What did the president say? How did he feel when he saw them?
He also felt they were horrific and horrible. I don't know anyone who could watch that video and not have that emotion.
It's time to say goodbye.
Okay, so the thing that I missed somehow yesterday was that Mayorkas had put the Border Patrol guys on ice. I missed that. They've been suspended.
Didn't he initially defend them, too?
Yes, he
must
did.
have got the order from on high saying, do something to these guys.
Yes, he said, talking about himself, Director of Homeland Security directed an immediate investigation of the events that were captured in the photographs and on video. We need this resolved quickly. I anticipate the results of the investigation will be available by the end of next week, yada, yada, yada. Then he said, the individuals who are the subject of the investigation are on administrative duties currently. They are not executing their other law enforcement duties, and they are not to be interacting with other migrants at this time during the pendency of the investigation. I love how he says, they are not executing their other law enforcement duties, and they are not to be interacting. In other words, reprimanding them publicly. So letting the underlings know they're not to be interacting. This is how serious I am. This guy has never spoken with this much force about anything before. So
They certainly didn't tell migrants not to come with this much force.
No. And so he says, we do not condone, we do not tolerate any mistreatment of any migrant. The actions we're taking are swift and strong, and we will take further action as the facts adduced in the investigation compel. What a dickhead. As the facts adduced in the investigation compel. God, what a prick.
During the pendency of the investigation.
So that's where he is. So, it's just a little tough. Here is Mayorkas talking in front of Congress about this.
What's images?
I'm very pleased you asked that question. It has been uppermost in my mind since I first saw the images late yesterday, Mr. Chairman. We commenced an investigation at my...
1 second. Just so we remind everybody, the images are of Border Patrol on horseback, doing their jobs without any whips, without any lariats, without any...
Right, they occasionally swing the reins at the horses.
Or it doesn't matter, there's just reins. They're not whipping anybody. If they wanted to whip somebody, they could whip people. They didn't use the horses aggressively at people. If they wanted to, they could have. They could have done all sorts of... Nothing happened. The visual was just good enough for psychotics and opportunists to say, oh, you know what? That's an assault I'm seeing, a racist assault. It looks like the old racism. And so psychotics and opportunists and stupids, I shouldn't leave out the third category, have decided this. The administration has face-planted so badly here on so many things, including COVID and Afghanistan and the border, which, as you heard in the open, is a total and utter... there's a Latin term for it called cluster fuck, and that's what's happening down there at the border. And so the administration is pushing forward with this just this make pretend thing, and now they suspended the guys, the Border Patrol people. So we've got here's the challenge, I guess, at this point. Is we're being pushed so far, pushed and bullied by this administration, by this messaging, by this toxic movement here, that I even told you 2 days ago or yesterday, whatever, it was hard to tell people, it's hard to defend anything. Hard to say. Last week, we were talking about when the Biden administration punitively cut off life-saving drugs in Florida.
Right.
And whatever. So now that's right. Last night, that's right. At this point, to do this is now it's interesting because people are being punished, have been punished, pending an investigation. What did the investigation find? Well, it couldn't have found that anybody got whipped because they weren't. Couldn't have found anything other than, these Border Patrol guys have guns, and a lot of them have body armor. A lot of them have other implements to use, like tasers and whatever else, and big, strong trucks, and big, strong horses. A lot of them are big, strong guys with big, strong skills. And that's not because they're doing the dance of the sugar plum fairies down there. That's because it's effing hard down there. And they're dealing with a lot of hard people, a lot of determined people. And they're law enforcement, and their job is to handle this. And the same way that it's the job during crowd control to handle it, right, in the United States. Or when people start riots. You wouldn't know it from last year. But generally, police used to stop riots, and including when you celebrated after a baseball team won or lost or whatever. Cops would go out there in force with horses everywhere and all sorts of other things and not take crap and drag kids from light poles and do whatever. So I don't want to be... I'm not going to accept any stage of this disingenuous fleet of assertions that the administration is pushing on us on any of these topics, whether it's Afghanistan, where we've abandoned people to die, where we're so ham-handed and so fearful politically that we left American soldiers vulnerable and they were blown up. And then we were so ham-handed and fearful politically and incompetent that to try to make up for it, we blew the hell out of a family, a bunch of kids. And then we were so fearful and politically cowardly that we then tried to hold off on telling the truth about that as much as possible until we got to the next thing, COVID mandate, the taking away the drugs that they need, that DeSantis needs, etc., and not being straight with people about what's going on at the border. And now, when people saw images at the border of the conditions that were going on, nobody reported on that. Nobody reported on the drone footage showing these people living in a hellhole down there under a bridge with not enough stuff to live. Nobody saw that, reported on that but Fox News. Nobody took Fox News' footage and said, as seen as Fox News. Nobody did any of that. They could have taken it all. They could. The left media and liberals and progressives everywhere chose not to see it.
Well,
They
yeah,
didn't
not
wanna
only
see
that,
it.
when Fox reported on it, the Biden administration made the FAA declare that
Right, and then
we couldn't
Fox reported on it. Then the Biden administration then made the FAA killed any drone flights over it. So, I mean, once again, every level here, they've been ratcheting it up more and more, and progressives have been happy not to report on it. And it's interesting, now they're reporting on almost nothing. They reported on nothing as a blackout at the border from all these organizations, blackout, blackout, blackout. Suddenly, Haitians being whipped, Haitians being whipped, Haitians being whipped, Haitians being whipped. Now that's the only border coverage. So, the problem here is this. The problem is not that this administration and their brothers in arms and sisters in arms in media and the general progressive push, the woke parts of the army, etc. It's not that you're just corrupt. There's plenty of corruption in politics, and in every industry there's corruption. The problem is that this is not when you're hurting people and you're destroying lives and harming what remains of institutions and distorting and toxifying the truth, the very concept of the truth, and killing people too in Afghanistan. When you're doing that, when you're doing all these malevolent things, if you're doing it for an immediate greater good, we had to leave some people behind in France after we escaped from Dunkirk because we had to save most of the army. We needed one bunch of troops to be a decoy for the Germans. We had to. It was a sacrifice. It was awful. They had to die. That happens all over the place and all the time. This isn't that. This is a sacrifice of livelihoods and lives, and the very concept of the truth, for purely politics, which means politics equals power. That's all this is. Sure, 6 miles down the road, there may be a concept and hopes of some, a Marxist utopia behind it all, but no, this is all done to preserve and increase power. That's all this is. This whole thing. So this whole lie, this whole thing built about guys whipping people nobody would ever believe that anybody ever whipped anybody. If you saw a movie that was just that 5 seconds, you wouldn't know what to call it. Away from politics, you wouldn't call it guy gets whipped because there's no whipping. You'd call it guy rides horse in water next to other guy maybe, or a guy holding two grocery bags is pulled by the shirt, maybe. You wouldn't call it guy gets whipped because it wasn't happening there. So what I'm saying to you, Alice, is when an administration does so many things simply out of malevolence, with no moral counterbalance or no moral rationalization even, it's simply overpower politics, then that person that administration and those people, those travelers with those people, are not friends.
What do you mean they're not friends?
They're not friends.
They're just like politics makes strange bedfellows.
No, they're not.
But
what are these people to me?
oh, to you.
And to me, to you. What are these people? What are these people to hardworking Americans?
Enemies?
I don't know. I know that I'm not doing the aggressing. I'm not doing the stuff that would have anybody declare me an enemy.
Right.
They're doing stuff to good and moral people who deserve to be treated like good and moral people. They're doing this stuff to them for no good reason. So I don't want to use that term.
Enemies.
But if that term is over here 6 feet, I'm finding myself getting closer to that term all the time because I'm running out of other terms. I can't look people in the eye. I can't look myself in the eye and say that this is okay. Unless I want
that
to...
they're like good people who just have like a different vision for America.
They're
or
ratcheting...
something.
Right. No. Exactly. I mean, there's no time... Now that I can see the appetite is so strong that they're willing just to construct something. If they're willing to construct something out of a picture that didn't show what they wanted to show, then they're just willing to assign anything. Maybe you were saying it yesterday. That's no different than Pizzagate, except that movement is really there.
Right.
Their movement is really there.
Well, right. And I think what's like so offensive about it is so just lazily done, right? Is that there's no justification and they don't even like try to make one. There's no like explanation. Like when you ask them like, where's the footage of the people being whipped? Where are the people who got whipped? You know, have we seen their injuries? Is there any evidence that anybody was hit with any kind of rope or device at all? Like, there's just nothing. They just don't care at all to do it. It's so hackish and terrible. I mean, like all of it is, right? Like the Hunter Biden laptop stuff is hackish and terrible. They just shut down the the New York Post Twitter for a couple weeks right before the election just because they didn't like what they reported. And then afterwards they were like, oh yeah, those emails were real. Oh well. Like, okay, you know, they're just like, oh yeah, we droned a family. It was a mistake, but you know, we stand by our intelligence assessment at the time. It sucks to be that family, I guess. Like, it's so lazy. It's so blatant. It's so just, I mean, like, I can't imagine, like, the people who are on Twitter defending it. I don't even know what to make of that. Like, I can't imagine the position of people who like, and we know people like this, who really like and defend this administration, who feel like they did a good thing voting for Joe and Dr. Jill and Kamala, and it was really like decent and good and moral, and they felt really good about it, and they felt like now, you know, everything's going to be okay. The superheroes are back in the White House. The Avengers, their arms are embracing us, like the lights at the inauguration. Oh, it's so beautiful. Like they felt so good about it, right? Like now they're having to go out there and defend this, and I can't imagine how, like, dirty you must feel having to go out there and pretend that, like, you really believe that people got whipped and it's the same as, maybe even worse than slavery somehow. Who was it today who said that? Was it Maxine Waters who said it was worse than slavery? Like, you have to go out and pretend that those pictures of some guys on horses with split reins, that's worse than slavery? Like, I mean, like, how much do you feel about yourself?
Well,
right?
I mean, I think she's a very rich woman who just has to go down and say these things.
I know, but we know people in real life who think this stuff, who are upset that our border patrol was whipping Haitians. Right? Like the same people the same type of people who reply to your post and say like, on January 6th, they killed cops, you know.
Right.
Right? Like, they're just if you're going out there and defending this stuff and saying this kind of stuff, and you're like trying to put some sort of justification or gloss on this, like the people who are going out here and saying that, it's a good thing we got out of Afghanistan. I mean, somebody replied to us on Twitter when we were talking about the Afghanistan stuff. Somebody that we know personally replied and said, like, it is like the most historic airlift in history. And
God, no.
God. So, like, how can you honestly go out there and say this stuff with a straight face and like feel good about yourself, especially if you're like, I mean, Maxine Waters is doing what she's got to do because she's in power and whatever, right? But like, how can like people who are just private citizens, like just to save face from their vote in November? Like, I voted for Trump twice, and sometimes he made me regret it. Like I had days, and I was honest with you and honest with people on this show on days when I thought he was screwing up and I was embarrassed to have voted for him. Really, because I had days like that. But like these people who just blindly go out and are like willing to say all this stuff about him and like repeat it like it's a serious, credible thing to say. I can't imagine how you like go through your day and like really convince yourself of that stuff, or if you just say it to make yourself feel better that you voted for the guy when he's clearly, I mean, maliciously inept.
It's not that it's just inept, Alice.
Well, that's why I said maliciously inept, because it's like, it's just like, screw you, inept. It's, I'm inept, and I guess that's too bad for you. I mean, he was on vacation again this week.
I don't care if he's on vacation. I don't care. We have the people around him. All of them are in this together at this point.
They're shouting over reporter questions and shoving them out of the room so that he doesn't have to answer questions. Like, how can
see if you've got video and pictures that millions of people at this point now have seen, hundreds of thousands have shared on social media, that clearly show not a whipping, but they have publicly said, even though we all know it isn't, that it was a whipping, and now they're punishing people for a whipping in which there was no whip or whipping, then they are willing to do anything.
Well, right. So what's going to happen now?
But hold on, Alice.
Okay.
They're willing to do anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and they withheld life-saving medications from people who live in the wrong states under the wrong governors and everything else. Yeah.
So what do you do when you have an administration at the federal level willing to do anything?
Buy guns?
That's not to shoot anybody in leadership, by the way, in case the NSA, if you're listening, that is for self-defense she's talking about. So today George Holliday died. Do you know who George Holliday is?
No.
George Holliday is the man who filmed Rodney King getting beat.
Oh.
Now, when that happened, in 1991 or right around then, everybody saw cops beating the frig out of this dude.
Right.
They had batons and all sorts of stuff. They were beating the crap out of him. Mm-hmm. Now, there's context, some people say, and there's this and that, and he was doing this before. But there's no doubt, everybody came to a consensus all together as a country to a person said, that guy is getting the crap beat out of him. There's no doubt about that. Right? And some people said that you didn't see before that he was on PCP and he was rushing them and they were whatever and they were afraid of it. Well,
but we saw him getting beat up.
And we all said, yes, that is a man getting beat up. Yes, that is a man getting beat up. So anyway, at least we all saw that. Mm-hmm. And it's funny. And so he died today. 61, whatever. Or yesterday. So it's funny because really...
Why are we laughing now?
Because had really the media, had the people who aren't insane but who are just opportunists really thought that the guy, that the horse guys were whipping the Haitians, they would have actually used that for a perfect tie-in, split screen, to show it. But why didn't they show it?
Because there was no video of Border Patrol agents beating up Haitians.
Right. In one part of the screen, there's a guy getting beat up. In another part of the screen, there's a guy standing in water while a horse rides around him. Right. Because you can't. Because people will see that one is a beating. It's a serious beating.
Well, right. Or even the George Floyd video. Like, I think you said this the other day, too. Like, whatever you think about, like, justified, unjustified, whatever, like, George Floyd died in the video. There's a broad consensus that that's a video of a cop and George Floyd who then dies during the course of the video. So at least we like are in agreement on the basic facts there. But like, yeah, so what happens now, right? Because they're investigating these agents. They've been reassigned to other duties where they won't be near any hapless migrants that they might whip, but with their whips that they apparently have or whatever. But like, so what's the investigation going to find? Right? Because is this going to be another one of these things, like the Black Lives Matter things where, you know, are there going to be like protests when people don't get fired? Because I assume like Border Patrol agents have a union and stuff, because most federal employees have a union. I don't really know, but I assume they're like unionized and that they're not going to be able to just like fire them when they didn't do anything at all. Right?
Right.
So like, especially if you don't have any, like with George Floyd, there was like a body, right? In this case, like, are there going to be any people that they're going to be able to show that have injuries?
No, or else he would be the most famous man in the world right now.
Is there going to be anything where they can show that anybody had a whip? Are they going to be able to show that anybody's reins made contact with a person?
No.
Like, so this is, I guess, where, like, I don't see how, if they're unionized or whatever, I don't see how the Border Patrol is going to be able to fire these guys when they literally didn't do anything. So when the investigation yields the information that we all know is true, that nobody got whipped at the border, right? They're going to have to like put these guys back on the job or whatever, right?
You would think so. And just to show you that this is 2021, and where we are, and the fact they didn't use this guy to make a tie-in with the whippings. Listen, this is the NBC News headline, and here's the lead of the story about George Holliday, the man who filmed Rodney King. George Holliday, man who filmed Rodney King beating, dies of COVID. What's the first line?
George Holliday.
No, hold on. Oh. George Holliday, he's 61, the man who filmed Rodney King beating, dies of COVID. What would the lead be in this? What's Holliday's claim to fame that changed forever the legacy of race in this country?
He filmed a Rodney King beating?
That should be the lead, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Here's the lead. Holliday was not vaccinated.
Well, I mean, that's not new. They're
just
into
think,
this.
well, I understand, but just think, they had a choice. Okay, do we take advantage of this because he saw the beating, he saw the first whipping of people and taped it? Or do we use that powerful drug of that he wasn't vaccinated and died of COVID that's so appealing to say? Which one do we do? God, that must have been torturous to pick one.
Yeah, but I mean, this is what they do. There was just a Daily Mail article that people are passing around that I've seen like liberals post unironically on Twitter. Daily Mail article. A California mother of 4 who was outspoken against vaccines and masks has died of COVID. Kristen Lowry, 40, from California, passed away September 15th. In screenshots taken from Facebook, family members say she lost her battle against COVID-19 after frequently posting content protesting vaccines and labeling herself unmasked and unmuzzled and a free thinker. See? Had it coming. Sucks to be her 4 kids. I guess they learned their lesson. Maybe they'll get vaccinated now. Like, can you imagine posting that? Can you imagine seeing that a mother of 4 died of anything? And going out and, like, posting it? Like, haha, see? Like, what is literally wrong with you? But yeah, I mean, it leads them, like, they think the most important thing about the Rodney King guy is that he was unvaccinated. So this is, like, their big thing. They have to do this all day. But I mean, like, whatever.
By the way, have you seen the speaking of that, have you seen the new Capitol surveillance footage that was just declassified?
No.
It's a good time to fill, Alice, when I'm yawning.
Sorry.
That's okay. It shows just people greeting each
Walking
other,
around.
walking through. They tried to deep six it. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Anything else going on?
So, Monica Lewinsky's been kind of back in the news.
Oh, good. I want to talk about her. One, I want to
Okay.
go on the record and say, always fairly beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Look good in a chapeau.
Yeah. So she's back in the news because there's this like documentary about her.
I've heard it was
Or
good.
not documentary, I guess. Docu-series, whatever. Anyway, it's got like actors in it. It's dramatized, but she was heavily involved in the making of it. I have heard it's good. It's on FX, I think. It's American Crime Story, and they did the Monica Lewinsky thing. But I don't know. So there's
Although the
kinda-
American Crime in there was not Monica Lewinsky.
Well, no, and I don't think they're trying to make the case that it was in the thing, or I don't
Good.
think they'd be using her as the advisor on making it, necessarily. But it's come up because it's like a little controversial because a couple years ago when like Me Too was happening, I guess this was like in 2018, she wrote a thing about how like, even though it was consensual, she was like sort of Me Too'd also because like power differential, and it's like taken her years to come to terms with that, and she's like glad Me Too's having the conversation, and et cetera, et cetera. So, some people are like rubbed the wrong way by this, that she's like attempting, that it's like revisionism, and that she always said it was consensual, and I think she's still saying it was consensual. But I think it's kind of an interesting question. The View attacked her.
Oh, really?
Well, they're saying that they're essentially they take issue with the fact that she's like trying to cast herself as a victim, and they're saying like she's not really the victim. Joy Behar said the real victim is America.
Right, because Trump used it.
Right, because Trump used it. Hillary Clinton and America were the real
That
victims.
is so perfect, such a perfect example of how women protected him, and they protected him too. Gloria Steinem did too. They protected him because we needed him. It doesn't matter. Fine, he was kind of rapey. We needed him. Let me play this Joy Behar. Hold on.
Hillary.
Hold on.
I would submit here that the real victim was the United States of America and Hillary Clinton. Because if you remember when the debate was going on between Trump and Hillary, Trump brought in all these so-called victims of Clinton's peccadillos,
So-called.
right? Okay? And
if they had brought in, if Democrats had done the same and brought in Donald Trump's victims and those who alleged,
they wouldn't have done anything.
Oh, they would have needed an arena.
Exactly.
And to be clear, there were a lot of.
Yes, Nana Navarro. This is a smart show.
A lot of women. Bill Clinton.
Yeah,
he was no saint, and
when he
abused his
brought
power
those
with
women
Monica.
into that debate, that hurt Hillary Clinton. And that is the real victim. The country lost a great person. Hillary Clinton could have been the president instead of that criminal that we had there for 4 years. And that's the real victim, and that's the real loser.
I want to push back.
I would.
So yeah, I mean,
there's nothing
and
toxic
by
about
the way,
that.
By the way, Trump didn't bring in Monica Lewinsky
No.
to the debate.
Right.
He brought in Jones to the debate, right? Isn't that who he brought in?
Probably,
Who was actually said it was non-consensual. So if we're gonna believe all
right.
women,
Juanita Broderick, did she go too?
maybe
He
that
might have
sounds
brought.
vaguely
Was Jennifer Flowers alive then? I don't know.
I don't know,
Kathleen
but-
Willey probably. He brought in.
Yeah.
There were a lot, so he could have brought in any
the
number.
so-called victims of his peccadillos. Is that what we're calling it now? Peccadillos?
Mm-hmm.
But raping people is a peccadillo. Tiny detail. I guess Ted Kennedy had drowning people as a peccadillo. But I just, it's incredible to me because, they purport to care about women. They would not hesitate to use that against somebody they didn't like in a second. But the fact that she says out loud that the real problem here is that this hurt Bill Clinton and thus by proxy hurt Hillary Clinton, it just goes to show you exactly what they think rape claims are for.
Oh, right. Great point. Absolutely. They're to use for utility.
Political purposes.
Right.
They're not about, if a person actually got raped or not. That's not, like, part of the equation for them.
Right. Well, and also...
It's for having your political team win. That's what rape claims are about.
Right. Yes. And also, it's about you need to shut up. Shut up about your pain because we have something really good invested in the guy who did this. Shut up about Harvey Weinstein. He's working on all sorts of good stuff. Plus, he gives a lot to charity.
Right.
So shut up about that. There's a bigger thing. Just take it and be quiet about it. Okay? Mm-hmm. If he wants you, if he gets to have you for a while, says the feminist. If he needs that, we need him out there doing good for us. So he'll rape some. That's fine. So, wow, talk about the classic way in the tiny Puritan village to slap the girl who's just been raped.
Right. And so, I think this is an interesting question a little bit. Like, was Monica Lewinsky a victim? Do you think she was a victim?
Well, she was not a victim in a sexual way. No, she was treated. Okay, I'll break it up into first of all with the sexual stuff. Mm-hmm. No, she had a crush on the most powerful man on the earth who was relatively young, charming guy, had game, and was interested in her. And I can't imagine a 22-year-old girl having any bigger fantasy than a guy, maybe she was an older man, who's an older guy, in the White House. You have all these amazings, and the most amazing guy in the world has a crush on you, too. You, little Monica, who wondered if she'd ever be anyone or whatever. There's no better romance. This thing, the way this should go is that eventually he breaks down and says he loves her, and they get married and they have kids, etc. Hillary, who obviously I spoke of in a negative way, goes away on for whatever. I think she was absolutely enraptured by the guy, as young women are, and it makes total sense. And she loved him, and then her feelings were hurt when he booted her, and she told her friend everything, and her friend, of course, was an opportunist, but she was salty, and where she was a victim was where they said, okay, this is how this works in this world, this men's world of power, since we've now had you, he's used you for all he wants now. Now we need you to shut up and go away. Here, peeling off bills, essentially, by getting her a gig at Clairol or whatever he got her a gig. Mm-hmm. And say, here you go. Put this, shoves it in her shirt. It says, go, see you, toots. Get out of here. That being dismissed, I think that 22-year-old girl who was falling in love with that guy, suddenly being treated like refuse to be thrown in a dumpster like that, was probably freaking jarring to her. And then, of course, having the nascent internet come down on her.
Well, also, the law enforcement coming after her and saying, like, you need to tell us stuff, or you're in trouble. You're gonna go to jail.
Oh, sure. No, and she was, parodied on Saturday Night Live. She was everywhere. It was everywhere. Everybody that Halloween, every girl of age was Monica Lewinsky. There's no doubt about that.
Right. So, but you say all that, and I don't know that she was a victim of a crime, but I think there's more. I think there are ways to be victimized by people that aren't criminal, and I think that, I guess where it gets interesting to me is, like, we've really hung our hat on the sexual ethic of consent, right? Mm-hmm. Like, anything goes as long as it's consenting adults, right? And I think we're all in agreement that in the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky thing, we're talking about consenting adults. With a big age differential and a big power differential, but these are consenting adults, and she's never really claimed otherwise in any way. But I think there are ways to be abusive towards somebody that aren't illegal. And I think Bill Clinton was abusive to her.
How?
Because I think, well, first of all, I think he was abusive to Hillary in that he was cheating on his wife.
Of course.
Which is
but we're not talking about Hillary.
Ethical. Right. Okay. So, but just, I mean, I think there are people on the left who don't really think Bill Clinton did anything wrong because it was consenting adults and Hillary forgave him, so tra-la-la, right?
Well, in this particular case...
Well, yeah, but...
Bill had a bunch of priors. This was a willing participant.
Right, but... So, I think that... that sleeping with people not your wife is wrong, first of all. And I think that sleeping with people not your wife when... you know that they're in love with you and you're making them think that you're in love with them too, and you're going to leave your wife and you have no intention of so doing.
It's kind of in the guidebook for men, Alice. That's what you do. When the hot girl in the office is making eyes at you and you want to have an affair and she's really into you and you're really attracted to her, these are all ideal situations.
Well, right, but I don't think it's right or ethical, and I think that it's abusive to all the people involved.
I don't know.
Because, well,
it's abusive to some of the people involved.
Among other things, it's lying, because if you don't have the intention to actually leave your wife for them, I mean, leaving your wife for them comes with other ethical problems, but, if you don't have the intention to leave your wife for somebody and you're giving them that impression so that you can sleep with them, I don't think that that's right.
Men have to give women false impressions so that they can sleep with them all the time. It's what they do, because bridging the gap between the the willingness of one party to match the willingness of the other party sometimes requires a tiny little bit of artificial structure. I'm just telling you that's how men would operate.
I'm agreeing with you, but I think
if you're getting hot and heavy, and she says, "I want you to know that I really like you, and I want to know you like me more than just a fling," right? What does the guy rule book say? I mean, I do know some men. By the way, I do know some men who wouldn't lie in that situation. Who actually, some really men who date a lot of women who actually only tell the truth, and I marvel at them. But
I think that it. So, I mean, I'm not asking what's typical for men to do, because I think I know what's typical for men to do. But I'm asking, do you think it's right?
Is it right? So,
in an ethical sense?
No, because if you start building a network of lies, then there's going to be several collapses. And no, I don't think it's right, and I don't think any men think it's right, and that's why they are very nervous about it. And I think that,
well, yeah, but I think so. I mean, I guess this is why it's an interesting question to me, because we've sort of decided as a society that anything goes as long as there's consent, and that doesn't cover a lot of situations where I think there's pretty broad agreement that even though people do it, something is wrong. Right?
Well,
for example, there's that scenario.
Else.
What about the girl who lies and says she's on birth control? What about that little lie?
It's in the girl rule book. It's also in their version of the book.
Is it ethical?
No, but part of the story of the men and women in relationships equals tiny little black strategy books on either side. Women do stuff. Women are master manipulators.
Right, but I think there's a movement in our society to kind of say, as long as there's consent, it's fine, right? And I look at what's the guy who was running, I think it was for Senate in North Carolina, who got caught in an affair. You know who I'm talking about, anyway.
The guy who was governor went down to South America?
No, not that guy. This was recent, the last couple years, and he was in a race. I want to say it was 2016 or 2018, maybe. And he was having an affair, and he lost the race ultimately, a Democrat. But he was having an affair, and all his texts got leaked with this woman that he was having an affair with, and people were oohing and ahhing over the text and saying how wholesome they were and what a cute relationship, and how the things they said to each other were really cute, and they liked them as a couple. And now he's back with his wife who has to listen to this, right? And like people, you know, sort of the attitude was like, what a wholesome little affair, like consenting adults, you know, it happens, like let's just pretend like even though everyone's a hot mess in their own way, it's okay. But that's like wrong, and it really hurt people and damaged people's lives because that's what things like that do. And I think that like
half of romance novels are about affairs. You saw Bridges of Madison County, very wholesome book. The guy's away, Clint Eastwood's in town, you know, he's taking pictures of bridges or something. I'm not condoning the culture.
But I don't think at the time people really viewed it as Monica being wronged.
No. Well, people...
And I think that for a lot of people, in particular on the left, but for a lot of people like in general who are uncomfortable like placing limits on sexual behavior, right? Like I think that there's a reluctance to admit that she was wronged, even though in my view, like I clearly think Monica Lewinsky was wronged. Not just by the media, not just by Ken Starr. Monica Lewinsky was wronged by Bill Clinton. He lied to her in order to get things from her that she probably wouldn't have done without that. And she
liked him. He wasn't.
She did like him.
Yeah.
But do you think if he'd said, I just, you know, want to do this and then, you know, tough luck, that would have been it? I mean, she was in love with him. I think he knew to invest
in the opportunity. But you know what's right? When you say that people didn't think it was wrong at the time, the problem was at the time is that his tribe had all the feminists in it. And so where it should have been a Me Too, and they could have said it was wrong, considering they were just getting off of hyperventilating over Anita Hill, they all decided not to. So there was no stamp on it as being... The right said he's a dirty, hornball, dog, rapist, POS. The left said it's over sex. I can't believe you're impeaching a guy over sex. This is just, grow up.
I mean, don't you think there's almost an attitude that it's like unenlightened to be hung up on sex?
Oh, definitely.
There's an attitude totally. Oh, you poor rubes. You really think that like people don't do things like this? Come on.
Oh, totally.
You're going to impeach somebody over a blowjob, please.
Alice Shattuck.
Sorry.
How do you even know what that is?
I've only heard tell.
From whom?
I mean, it in the Monica Lewinsky thing.
I should hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, but I think that's a coastal progressive elite thing as well, where they think that's why, shout your orgasm. You know, the vile woman there dressed in white and the DNC. You know, it's so cosmopolitan, elitist to shout your orgasm and this and that, and we invented free sex as if they invented free sex. We're allowed to live like derelicts and the Hollywood crowd, and they're really the most bottom-feeding bunch of people there can possibly be. But, they have a different religion, as we talk about all the time.
But yeah, that's
Jake Tapper dated Monica Lewinsky.
I know. I did know that, actually.
All right, good.
So anyway, we'll have to watch the show and get back to you all. Thank you so much, everyone. If you've watched the show, let us know. Lots of great feedback about Helen Keller, by the way. We have some Helen Keller deniers in the audience out there.
I know. I'm on their side now.
We see you. You can email us your thoughts on that or Monica Lewinsky or whatever. That's burnbarrelpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at burnbarrelpod. We're at burnbarrelpodcast.com. Gab, Parler, Facebook, Burn Barrel Podcast, YouTube, Rumble, all good things.